Hi again. I'm out in Austria again this week, and just like for that gradient descent video, I'm in Zell am See, but this time for our first family ski trip during half term. And the boys had a few lessons in Tamworth Snowdome before the holiday, and it seems to have paid off as they haven't been in the absolute beginners group while we've been out here. And that means that they've had more chance to explore the mountain with their instructor, haven't you?
Yeah.
Getting a brief go on a red run on their second day. They're both absolutely loving it. We've had two very tired out boys every evening after dinner with all of the fun on the slopes, and then a splash about in the hotel pool after skiing every day. Have you been enjoying it, boys?
Yes.
Watching the beginner ski lessons whilst having the odd work conversation with clients grappling with a sudden surge in widespread AI use across their businesses has prompted a thought. In both cases, it's essential to get the basics right. The availability of a lot of generative AI tools like ChatGPT and Bing's integration of GPT and a host of other text, image, music and video tools mean that suddenly lots of businesses are becoming first-time users of AI. So what are the AI basics? What is the equivalent of getting to grips with snowplow turns? In this video, we'll run through 10 tips for businesses wanting to experiment with generative pre-trained AI models, going from the beginner green slopes to some of the more difficult to navigate topics on those steeper runs, just like this one we're going past here. So here we are, starting out on the green runs. Number 1, confidentiality. These systems involve accessing the pre-trained AI either through a web interface or an API calling to servers controlled by the provider of the model. Information security and confidentiality arrangements for these systems are an unknown quantity. Depending on the terms of access, some operators of pre-trained AI models also reserve the right to keep all text inputted into the system for future training. I've heard of situations where some users are putting large amounts of confidential information from their employer, or even worse, their employer's customers and clients, into these AI systems without thinking about or realising the confidentiality consequences. Therefore, until terms with proper confidentiality protections can be put in place, policies against using confidential information would be sensible. Having a clear assurance for your customers or clients that their data is safe in your hands and not being leaked via AI tools is also essential. These are not really different risks to the confidentiality issues with any web or API-based tools from third parties. And in enforcing policies for generative AI, some organisations have found that some of their people have been sending all manner of company data via online grammar checkers, reading tools and the like, all of which pose those same confidentiality risks. Okay, we're beyond the green runs now. We're up the mountain on a busy blue run. Number 2, data protection. Now this is almost an extension of that last point, but any user who puts information into a pre-trained AI that can identify an individual, whether on its own or with other information, will be using that system to process personal data. All of the confidentiality concerns apply, but now we also need to consider whether data subjects would have been informed of such processing in advance. Answer, almost certainly not. We also need to consider whether such processing constitutes profiling or automatic decision making, and there's certainly a very high probability that it will. And any such processing almost certainly won't have considered data impact assessments or cross-border data transfers either. Again, policies need to be strictly guarding against personal data use with such systems, although this time with a risk of steep regulatory fines if that risk isn't properly addressed. Number 3, intellectual property. Here, we're talking about the users of a pre-trained AI, not the training process of that system. There are certainly live cases being pursued in relation to various training activities, with claims touching on everything from use of stock photos to code in public version management systems. Now, it's fairly unlikely that pre-trained AI systems will produce infringing content unless specifically prompted to do so. However, fairly unlikely is not a zero probability. Users of generative AI should treat any content generated using these systems just as if it were human generated and rigorously check and content clear before use. There's also the potential loss of IP in any content inputted into the system, especially if terms allow the AI operator to retain text prompts and uploaded content for training purposes. Again, corporate policies ensuring valuable IP is not used with AI would be sensible. Number 4, accuracy. It's a point that's in some ways related to what we were just talking about in relation to IP. While you're doing that content clearing, fact check the output from the AI too. It's always worth remembering that content generated by an AI can be incorrect, but incredibly convincing. And this can lead to factual errors in your publicity material and things with very serious consequences. Even the search giant Google learned this to its cost, with an error about the James Webb Space Telescope's discoveries having crept into publicity material for Google's forthcoming AI-augmented search solution. For many pre-trained solutions, fact-checking is essential. And approach that accuracy question in relation to content as if it had been generated by a very bright and capable work placement student. It might be beautifully written, but you're still responsible for checking that it's actually correct. Number 5, provenance and distinctiveness. When anyone can generate content easily using an AI, how do you know when something is genuinely someone's own work rather than machine output? This will matter more in some contexts than in others. In any recruitment scenario, assessment or exam, you want a high degree of confidence that the submission is the candidate's own work. There are now tools being made available that can rate whether particular generative AI tools may have been used to generate particular content, but this becomes an escalating war of the bots, with those tools then being a hurdle to be overcome for the next generation of AIs that produce ever more human-seeming output. That such tools exist indicates that current generative AIs do have a tendency to produce similar content in response to certain prompts. After all, I've seen many very similar ChatGPT lists the legal issues with ChatGPT articles, and each one has been extremely similar, almost to the point of being copies of each other. In China, there are already rules requiring that any AI-generated content be identified as such, given concerns around fake imagery. Awareness of the problems with deepfakes is growing in the public, and therefore for both local regulatory reasons and issues of public confidence, any AI-generated content used by your organisation should be clearly identified as such. Number 6, security. Okay, we've hit the red runs now, definitely more difficult. Think of security both internally and externally. From an external perspective, all of these generative AI tools suddenly mean that there are certain URLs and APIs regularly being called by many businesses. A lack of understanding and desperation to sign up to these tools gives bad actors an opportunity to try man-in-the-middle attacks or offer sign-ups to services via some intermediate layer that's skimming all information sent to and from the underlying AI tool. Even if you can be confident that your people are accessing the real tool, few organisations will be in a position to check the cybersecurity arrangements of the underlying systems. And this all links back to the confidentiality concerns discussed earlier. AI tools can pose a second and more insidious risk internally. Since many of these tools can generate code snippets as well as plain text, they can empower the experimental coders across your organisation. With many systems being accessed via intranets or other APIs on the corporate network, generative AI can help those wishing to access resources beyond their pay grade to create various hacks, workarounds and new API calls that they're not supposed to have access to. This might be done innocently, but it can break or circumvent checks and balances. All of this creates 2 new headaches for cybersecurity teams looking at new patterns of network activity, both to new external services and from within the organisation's own network. Number 7, availability and reliance. With many of these AI tools being made available for free, at least initially, we've seen much interest in the tools and therefore experimentation within lots of organisations. A wave of creativity has been unleashed, and there are clear opportunities to take advantage of AI capabilities in many areas of business. However, before you start to integrate tools into essential processes within your business, ask yourself how you can be sure that they'll be available when you want them to be, and what you can do if suddenly they aren't available. Just like any cloud platform that's meant to be integrated into an operating model, key questions around the availability metrics and service levels need to be addressed. With more professional contracting arrangements for some of these services just being rolled out and high customer demand for those that are being made available, getting contractual assurance isn't straightforward at present. Number 8, bias and ethics. The datasets used to train these models mean that they inevitably reflect society's biases back at us, and not necessarily the biases of today, but rather a wide range of historical biases given the age of some of the material used to train them. Some of these biases can be addressed by engineering the prompts used to specifically address potential sources of bias, but that often simply masks rather than cures the real underlying biases in the system. There's also the ethical question: just because I can do something, does that mean that I should? Use of AI for certain tasks can stray across ethical boundaries, and making those questions even more difficult. No two people would necessarily draw those ethical boundaries in the same place. These questions of bias and ethics, should be addressed at the most senior levels within the organisation, and clear policies communicated to everyone. Otherwise, you end up with important ethical questions being decided by what might be most expedient for a particular worker at a particular time, with potentially little thought for the wider context or implications. And then get ready for the discrimination claims if that happens. Okay, let's go from the red runs to the black runs. Number 9, people and industrial relations. We've touched on the people impact many times in the topics above, and lots of your people will be excited about AI. They'll see the opportunity and they'll want to implement it within their own job or function. The AI augmented worker has the potential to be significantly more productive. Not all of your people will necessarily greet AI as a good thing though. Some will be deeply skeptical, fearing for their own future usefulness, or thinking that machines might replace some or all of their role. Implementing AI as part of HR processes, recruitment and talent management brings with it many of the confidentiality, data, security, bias and ethics challenges already discussed. This has been one of the early focal points of AI implementation in many organisations. As an organisation starts to take advantage of AI, having a clear message that the organisation wants people to see how they can augment their role and develop their productivity with AI tools can help to calm nerves and give permission to those worried about their role, get them to start to think more creatively about what these tools can do to help rather than replace. So here we are then, it's the big one. Number 10, governance and regulation. I'm at the top of the most difficult black run on the mountain, Tras 14, and about to go down here. Pulling all of this together into an AI governance framework with proper senior stakeholder involvement is the best way to get all of this right. In this video, I've mentioned policies around confidentiality, around data protection, security, bias and ethics, and of course people. We've thought about copy clearance and fact-checking of content generated by AI. We've thought about contracting issues around availability and reliability of these systems. But all that needs to be drawn together, and the policies and operational decisions need to be consistent with each other and aware of each other. With new laws, such as the EU's AI Act, about to impose significant additional mandatory assessment and record-keeping obligations on those operating AI systems in various high-risk use cases, getting proper AI governance in place isn't a question of if, but of when. You can get fit for the future now and really take advantage of these tools, knowing that you're compliant with future legal requirements, or you can wait and have to undertake expensive remediation exercises in a couple of years' time. Right, let's see how I do on this run. Wish me luck. Right, well, I don't know whether or not this is going to come across on video, but they are not messing about with this one. This is a properly steep slope. Well, I made it. There's the finish line. And there's the bottom of what I've just come down. Whew. I think getting AI right is a little bit easier than that run.